Marcus, who says, um, haven't grieved my father yet, and it's been a couple of years, and he was my favorite person, and I miss him, but why do you think that is? And I'm like, well, what have you been doing over the last couple of years? And he tells me the story of how he's doing all the things his father used to do for the community, and he's planning, and you're planting in this garden, and you're doing all these things, and it's like, that's grief too. You have been grieving. It doesn't just look like that. And he's like, oh, I've been waiting for this bomb to go off.
Yeah.
And it's like, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes a flower blooms, and it's like that too.
Hello, my grieving friend. It's Lisa. Whether you're a longtime listener or you're tuning in for the first time, welcome to Grief is a Sneaky Bitch podcast. I'm so glad you're here. By now, you likely know I'm passionate about exploring the nature of grief. As a narrative therapy trained social worker, a grief activist, and a widow, I'm dedicated to helping us learn to be in relationship with our grief instead of running from it. In our modern culture, we've pushed grieving into the shadows, something to be experienced privately, causing us to suffer unnecessarily and in isolation. Grief is our human inheritance. It offers us medicine if we tend to it as a community. So together with my extraordinary guests, and this season answering your questions too, we're changing the narratives of grief, one conversation at a time. He's back. Yes, my friends, I'm welcoming back my friend and storyteller, Darnell Lamont Walker, to the show. You might remember if you listened to our previous episode, he's a death doula, Emmy-nominated writer, and cultural anthropologist whose work lives at the intersection of grief, culture, and storytelling. Across the world, from Johannesburg and Saigon to London, Amsterdam, Ghana, and beyond, Darnell has helped individuals and communities find spaces where their stories could be shared safely and held with care. In his legacy work with dying clients, this often looks like preserving favorite recipes, ensuring that long after someone is gone, families can still gather, cook, eat, and remember the love that once lived at that table. His new book, Never Can Say Goodbye, which I had the honor of being an early reader for, reflects on his early journey as a death doula and the lessons learned from walking alongside the dying. At the heart of all of his work, and as we explore in today's conversation, Darnell helps people tell the truth of their lives, tend to one another through transition, and leave behind something nourishing, whether that's a story, a ritual, or a meal that keeps them close. I can't wait to share this conversation with you. My friends, guess what? We have an amazing repeat guest because Darnell Lamont Walker is back on Grief is a Sneaky Bitch podcast. So good to see you, my friend.
Always a pleasure. Oh gosh, it's always good being here with you.
So glad you're back on the show. Listeners, if they hadn't heard your first episode, which go check it out, heard again a little bit about your story and about your extraordinary new book, which I may have bragged a little bit that I got to be an early reader to the book.
Yes.
Lucky me. So Never Can Say Goodbye, The Life of a Death Doula and the Art of a Peaceful End is out by the time you're listening to this conversation. And you're welcome, listeners, for learning about this book because it is extraordinary. Whether you work in the space or you are a human, which means everybody listening, there are stories in here that are so informative to not just how we die, but Darnell, one of the things I hope we're going to get into today is so much of the wisdom that your clients and you offer about how we live.
Yeah, absolutely.
How we live. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to dive deep. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see I've got I'm going to do my little ASMR. I've got my usually sticky notes.
I need a book. I need a book.
I've got it tabbed here. We're going to dive into some of the specific stories, really powerful, funny, meaningful stories. But I wanted to bring us back to ground in the conversation where I always do and curious what comes up differently maybe than the last time, which is given the work that you do, given that we're both on this mission to sort of center aliveness in a world full of loss, when you look back and your story was you had a lot of powerful people modeling death care, even if that's what they weren't labeling,
Yeah.
right, death care, death doula work in the past. But is there an early memory of grief or loss that still to this day really informs how you show up in the world? Can you think of an early loss and how the adults were modeling what it looked like to show up for?
Yeah, I I've been thinking a lot about lately that like I was a kid, right? And my great grandmother and who and the guy who was in the role of my great grandfather, who we called uncle, one of those old school family.
I got you. I
I'm
got
not
you.
even gonna get into the whole story because it's crazy, but my great grandfather, I'll call him that for the purposes of this conversation. Um, I remember like spending so much time with them as a kid, and one day, and I've been thinking so much about it because one day they just weren't there,
Yeah.
either of them, and I can't remember who died first. I have no memory of the exact year it happened. I want to say I was 6, but there's nothing
Yeah.
there. And so for me now, and because I've been thinking about it, and I write for kids TV, and so I've been trying to figure out ways to incorporate that. Like, why did no one talk to me about that?
Yeah.
Why was there never a conversation? And now, I'm 43, about to be 44, and now I'm asking the questions of like, what year did this happen? And who
Yeah.
died first and how did they die and why did no one say this? And so now I'm creating conversations with the kids in the family and with kids all over the world, thankfully, thanks to some of these studios and people who continue to hire me, um, to really pull that out and really get families talking more about
Yeah.
death, dying, grief, because they really meant something to me. And I don't feel too impacted by it, but don't I didn't get the closure that I deserved around that, and I don't
Yeah.
think any of me and my cousins, none of us did. Uh, and so, yeah, that's
Yeah.
and it's something I've literally haven't thought about in decades, and it just hit me this week, and so I'm glad you asked
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. And you have an interesting experience, I think, in my knowledge of having gotten to know you and become your
Mhm.
friend outside of our podcast studio, in that you had sort of both and in your growing up life. A lot of us had either the kinds of families who were like, don't talk about anything, hide away from death,
Mhm.
taboo subject, we don't talk about it. Or maybe if we were lucky, we grew up in a family where we welcomed open conversations, kept memories alive. And I feel like your family, even though you just shared a story where there was a kind of shutting off, there was a lot of ways in which your family was also very open to.
Very much so. Yeah, I
um,
was lucky with that. My grandmother and my mom have never been afraid to have those conversations
yeah,
when probably just those 2, and thankfully, I was with one or the other,
yeah,
and even to this day, like, I invited my folks up for Thanksgiving, and it was like, we're sitting at the table, and I'm like, "So," and actually, my mom is just like, "So, when I die, this is what needs to happen." Right, so
great,
we're just updating that information, but yeah, since I was a kid, I was, like, 9 when my grandmother's sister died, and I think that's when she realized that, like, I was a very curious kid, so
yeah,
it was me asking those questions of, "Oh, well, what's happening? How is this happening?" And she saw that, and so she's like, "Oh, you can have this conversation too. Let me pull you in." So she's pulling me in, and then I was the one who she shared all of those, you know, this is what I will not go through. And if this
yeah,
happened to me, this is when I want to die. When it's time for me to go, this is what needs to happen. And so when
yes,
the rest of the family was like, "Oh, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to talk about you dying," And so thankfully it came down to me. I was there for her in her
Yes.
last days, and I was the one who was able to give her permission. I was the last person to see her, the only person in the room, and I was the one who gave her permission to go. I knew she was ready to go.
Yeah.
I knew because of our conversations, I knew this is not how she wanted to exist.
Yeah.
Um, and on the other hand, her son, who's my father, will not talk about
Talk
death
about it.
whatsoever. I'll call him, and even talking about his mom. We talked a little bit ago, and he's like, "I saw what you you wrote about your grandma." I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Man, I miss my mom." I'm like, "Yeah, me too." And then I'll go into it. I'll start
Yeah.
I'm like, "Oh, he's ready," and I'll
The
say
door's
something.
open. The door's
Yeah,
open.
and I'll sneak it in, and it'll last for about 30 seconds, and then he realizes what's happening, and he was like, "No, no, no. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and hang up. I'm gonna hang up
Yeah.
now, but talk to you later." I'm like,
I mean, you can only do what you can do. And
"Do
really
it."
what you're doing, Darnell, is not just modeling for your family, but as you said, as a writer and TV and other
Mhm.
places, and now as a death doula individually with people, and now with this beautiful book, Never Can Say Goodbye, you're modeling. And that's all we can do. It's part
Yeah.
of the mission of my own show. It's like I'm just walking the walk, I'm talking the talk, I'm interviewing people, I'm supporting people, and we just hope that the ripple effect and trust that the ripple effect of creating a culture of openness will. And the fact that your dad gave it 30 seconds is maybe 30 more seconds than he might have given it,
Oh, absolutely. I honor that.
before.
I am grateful for it, and I will continue to sneak those things into the conversation,
I
as much as I can.
I love it. I really
Mm,
do. I love it so much. Thank you for sharing that with us. I've spent a lot of time, of course, with your book because, as I said, I got to read it, prior to it coming out, but I've been revisiting it now that I have the gorgeous hard copy. Later, if you're watching on
yeah,
YouTube, you can
yeah.
see this gorgeous paperback here. I've been thinking about all the incredible stories that you weaved throughout the book, the different
Mhm.
um, roles that you played as a death doula as you walked in, sometimes long ahead as people were pre planning, sometimes literally at the last minute as maybe somebody was passing, and sort of thinking through what are the lessons of some of the stories, which I'm going to dive into today. I thought I would start with a question that I think, whether again you're listening as somebody who works in the space or just as a human who loves people, which means you're going to be alongside one or more people that passes away, even with the experience that you have, right? Even with the training that you have, even with the wisdom that you've learned the hard way with working with people,
Yeah.
what do you know you have to do, or what do you still grapple with, or what are you have to do in terms of your own self-care as you do this work? Because you talk a lot in the book about how you talk with either caregivers or the people who are dying about their own care.
Mhm.
And I know this as a provider too. Just
Yeah.
because we can talk the talk doesn't mean we can always walk the walk in those moments. So what does self-care look for you? Where do you struggle?
Yeah.
Just yeah.
Very true. For to start, self-care for me comes in the form of food and food and travel and just disappearing from the world for a while. Like I was lucky enough, I guess 6 years this year, um to have I bought a cabin in the middle of the woods on top of a mountain by a small body of water,
Yeah.
and it is the peace that I need when I need to disappear.
Yeah.
And people always say, "You don't get lonely up there?" And I'm like, "No, listen, I'm great company, and so I love my own company, and I need it. I need to just
Yeah.
disappear for a little bit so I can think and really sit with those moments and honor those moments that people allowed me to have with them, um, and reflect and journal and write and catch up with myself, 'cause it goes so fast and I'm like, "Oh, what's
Yeah.
happened?" And I'll sit there and it's like, "What has happened over the last 3 months?" And so I get to do that. I get to and but I also love taking care of people. I love the work that I do so much
Yeah.
that it's not as draining as some people think,
Mhm.
think it is. Like, even though it's death, even though it's grief, even though it's loss and some of the
Yeah.
hardest times in people's lives, one of my goals has always been, I just don't want people to be alone in that. And
Yeah.
so by fulfilling that goal, it actually fills me up instead of drains me. And so it's
Yeah.
sort of this. self-charging system, you
Yeah.
know? So I love that. I love that uh, part of it for me, and it feels like the purpose. So that fills me up too.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. What was
Yeah.
the second part of that question?
Well, no, just I mean, I think it was you're sort of getting to it. It's like, and I totally relate to you.
Yeah.
Actually, turning towards death, turning towards grief is how I center aliveness, being purpose
Mhm.
driven, and actually being to do something, which sometimes even just looks like quietly companioning somebody,
Yes.
does relieve the overwhelm that happens for us when we feel like we have no agency. So,
Mhm.
actually doing this work, I totally get you,
Yeah.
is in a way enlivening, which sounds odd to folks who are on the outside, maybe. And sitting with big feelings a lot and other people's pain
Yeah.
is inherently draining. So I hear you, and I know this about you again as a friend that meals, cooking, travel, and
Mhm.
I think to your point, solitude. Um, and I heard you sort of saying secreting away.
Yeah.
But I'm curious for me, I don't want to put this on you. For me, my
Mhm.
love of my own company and my solitude is not about necessarily numbing out or tuning out. It's actually creating a kind of spaciousness so that
Mhm.
I can metabolize what I've just heard, witnessed, experienced. Is that
No,
what solitude
absolutely.
offers you? Okay.
Absolutely. It's exactly that. I can't add anything to it. That's exactly what it feels like. And I think we all need that. I think, I learned it. I learned how to do that in college. And I was able to thank my effective listening teacher recently, who taught me how to critically reflect and sit there and really just do
Yeah.
that. And so I'm so
Yeah.
grateful for that. And but that's exactly it.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. So I want to dive into the stories, but I'm curious because you've served alongside as a death doula,
Mhm.
because you were sort of a death doula before you were professionally a death doula, and then even since you become a more formalized death doula, lots of stories.
Mhm.
How did you, just putting your writer's hat on for those who are also writers, maybe they're thinking of writing their own memoir, they're writers in their own profession. I thought about this even as, when I wrote my own book. How did you think about the different stories
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the collection and sort of the broader story? Because we're both storytellers.
Yeah.
So there's a
Absolutely.
lot of stories you could have pulled from, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Mhm.
Why this combination of stories? What do you feel like it offered the reader?
Yeah, great question. Great question. For me, I'm thankful to HarperOne and my editor for just saying, here we love your samples, we love these sample chapters. Just go write a book, send it to us when the when the draft is done. And so there was no outline in my head, and literally I would just sit down. Um, my goal was to write at least 2,500 words a day, right? And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, here we go, and would show up to this space, to this library or bookstore, coffee shop, whatever it was, with no idea what was going to come out. And I'd sit down and just say, huh. And then I think for a moment, and then, I'm like, oh, you know, um, that kid I met at Burning Man, like that
Yeah.
really impacted me. What did that mean to me? Um, and somehow, like every time I sat down to write, something would just pour out. And I don't know if it was so much a conscious,
Yeah.
intentional thing. It was just like, oh, this is what's coming. Um, or I'd go home that night, and the thought of, one of the chapters is about the guy I met. And I think the stories in there that interest me most, or that came out that really interested me most and really boggled my mind, was the times I showed up as something other than a death doula and became that in the process.
Yes. Yeah.
So the guy, at the funeral, I was there to be a photographer, or I'm at Burning Man to be a burner, and this guy dies. And, it's like, damn, those really got in my head. And so I'm really grateful for those stories that
Yeah.
came to me when I set to write. But I didn't intentionally, like, I didn't have an outline. I didn't,
Yeah. Or I have to have these types of stories versus these
yeah.
types of stories.
So when I had them all written down and I sent them off, I just, like, there was no order or anything to it. And I sent it to Angela over at Harper, and I'm like, listen, I don't know what order you're going to put this in. I don't even know if these all make sense or if you don't want to use any of them, but here's what I got.
Yeah.
And here's
Yeah.
60,000 words. Good luck.
Yeah.
And thankfully, they all just made sense. I think, somehow whoever,
Yeah.
however made it
However
happen.
it happened.
However it happened.
Well, I love that so much, again, as a fellow writer, but also as somebody who is in this work. I think there's a couple of lessons there. One is, I think, and I say this all the time, this is from my narrative therapy training and social work as a writer, as a consumer, as a voracious reader. I think the most powerful stories to read, the most moving stories to read, the most interesting stories to read are the stories that the writer had to tell.
Mm-hmm.
Not
Yes.
that they thought they should tell, not that they were overly worked to tell because they thought there was some popularity about it, but it was like you can tell that the writer needed to tell this story. And I
Mm-hmm.
felt very much in reading this book that these stories were stories that you couldn't. It's sort of that question that I think we talked about with our project that we worked on with the Palliative Story Exchange with
Mm-hmm.
our friends over there at the Palliative Story Exchange, you and I, which is like, what story can't you stop thinking about?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that prompt as a
That's it.
question feels like that's what came through in your book.
Yeah. No better way to put it. It very much came out that way. Even because some of these were blips, like
Yeah.
it surprises me. Like, why did that stay with me? Um, why am I still thinking about that? Why is this the one that's pouring out when I could be telling, like, you finish a book and you're like, oh, I could have,
Oh,
what, I should have put this in there.
I'm still looking at my book a couple of years later like, "Dang."
Darn.
Yeah.
But it's not what came at the time, and
Yeah.
it's fine.
Yeah.
And it's perfectly fine. The book came the way it was supposed to come.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the story with Larry at the funeral where I was a
Yes,
photographer.
please.
Um, like I show up as a photographer. The cousin hires me to just come take pictures. And I'm like, I have a broken camera and a cell phone. And she's like, no, that's fine. We just want to capture the memories. And I get to the funeral and I'm taking pictures. And he was a Marine. I believe he was in his 80s, owned this hotel. And she, maybe 30 years younger than him. And I'm talking to her and she's telling me these stories about how as a kid, she would come and spend summers with him at this hotel and help him like take care of the land. And I'm like, oh, that's beautiful. Was he ever married? She's like, no. And telling me bits of his life. And we get to the eulogy and I'm taking photos of all of his friends who were like, sons of the American Revolution and like that group of guys, right? And they're all with their wives and everyone's 80.
Yeah.
And she's talking and she's going through this eulogy and she says, and I'm just so grateful for the groundskeeper who came and helped him take care of this land, Larry, who's been here for years. And he's been a trusted friend for whatever. And I look back and Larry's in the back just crying by himself. And I'm watching and I'm like, I don't think Larry's just a groundskeeper, right? And I'm like, I think, oh, wind blowing. And I'm like, I don't
Okay.
think Larry's just a groundskeeper. And so I'm looking and I'm like, oh, Larry's carrying so much pain. This was
Yeah.
his lover. He loved this man.
Yeah.
And because of time, generations,
Yes. Yeah.
you know, performance, all of these things, it just couldn't be what they wanted it to be. And so after the funeral, I'm like, and I have to say something to him.
Yeah.
Um, and so I find him and I just talk to him and I'm like, do you need a hug? And it was like the first time anyone ever felt that he needed that. And it was like, yes. And it's like, I see you, I witness you, I
Yeah.
can be here for you to do that thing you needed that you didn't get to do
Yeah.
when everyone else was doing it. And it was like, oh, and so that story stayed with me. And that was well over, it might have been 16 years ago now,
Yeah.
when that happened.
And to your
Um,
point, it wasn't necessarily, a client that you were working with over weeks and months,
no,
but it was so impactful for the very reason that the instinct of who you are came
mhm.
calling through even in a different setting.
Yeah, even in a different setting, in a different role. And it was so crazy. I remember having to call my friend who was a professor at we were in Virginia, and he's a professor at the university, teaching gender studies and queer studies. And I called him and I say, I need you to come to this repast with me. I get a +1. Come have some food, but I need you also here, because we're going to create this circle and talk to this guy. And so he has someone to talk to. And it was like, yeah, he's like, I'll come up. And we had this moment, at the repast. And it was like, I'm so grateful, because I've known people who, even a client recently, like last week, I get a call, not so much a client, but just someone who called for advice, but had a secret relationship, and he died on vacation. And I'm like, well, what do you want to do? Can you do this? Can you like, no one knew about us. And, no one wants me involved.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, so where does that grief go? Where does that love go? Where do you get to express yourself? Where do you get to get this out? And, so it comes up, it comes back.
Yes. Yeah.
I hate that people have to deal with that alone.
I do too. And Larry's story, and that story that that you shared in the book and you shared just now, I feel speaks. There's a couple of, I don't know, gems, lessons, wisdoms I just want to pull out a little bit for the listener again. Um, the first is, of course, you were already a trained person to do this, but what I think you really modeled in the story of Larry's experience is that no matter who we are, at our core, we want to just be seen and held and validated in our grief.
Mm-hmm.
And that though we all want to have skills, it doesn't require you to be a social worker, a trained death doula, that as a gesture of care, if you're the neighbor, you're the friend, you're the colleague, you're the person who happens to be at the service, is to go over and to witness somebody. I see you're in pain. I see you're grieving. I want to hold space for you and acknowledge it. It's that, I don't want to use the word simple because I don't want to trivialize the depth and the importance of it. And yet we overcomplicate this showing up thing. And that story is just so powerful. And you brought up a topic that I'd love for you to talk about maybe in other stories that took place in the book. But the other theme that you just shared about, Darnell, that I think is important too, is all of the disenfranchised grief. That so many of us carry, whether it's secret relationships or like long over relationships, but that we still carry the kind of maybe complicated relationships that we had that were happy or ending, but we're still feeling grief.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about what you've discovered when you're working with people who have what we would call disenfranchised grief, which if you don't know, it just sort of means like societally or culturally dismissed as being of you having the right to grieve a particular loss. That's what we mean when we say disenfranchised grief. What have you noticed about how you show up? We'll be right back with more of this beautiful conversation. My hope is that this show feels like a safe space to be inside your grief. Remember, you don't need to do this alone. Your grief is valid and a normal response to loss. And the truth is, we live in a grief-illiterate culture, which makes navigating this process more challenging than it needs to be. As a narrative therapy-trained social worker and student of grief education and ritual, I'm here to walk alongside you. I'll offer you a place to feel seen and held and help you discover skills and practices for being with both grief and joy. Let me be your guide. If you're interested in learning more about individual grief support with me, you can visit lisakeefauver.com after the show today. That's Lisa, Keefauver.com.
I don't show up too different. Like you said, everyone wants to be witnessed. And I think that's a large part of my work is to say, listen, I'm here. I see you. And to show up and listen. But it's real. There are people who are dealing with so much and don't feel like they should be, have the right to. And even those who don't feel they have the right to their feelings, um, where they're grieving, but it's like, but I'm also upset. I'm also very angry at this person. I,
Yes.
uh, I talk in the book about, um, a mother who hadn't talked to her kid in 20 years.
Yeah.
And, it's like this daughter who felt who's been told, "Well, it's your mom.
Yeah.
So you should," it's like, "Well, my mom hurt me." Or,
Yeah.
don't speak ill of the dead type of thing, it's like, but I've been hurt and I'm also this thing. And so I show up and I say, "Well, I'm here to just witness and listen, and I don't want you to be alone. You're not alone. You're not the only person who's ever felt this.
Yeah.
Um, what do
And
you need?"
allowing for the both and,
And
that
allowing
maybe there is some grief and some
for
anger and some rage
They
too.
can both
Yeah.
exist. They're all they can both exist
Yeah.
right in there. And hopefully there's a way, hopefully there's space and this dying person and people around that will give you the space to get all of that out.
Yeah.
Sometimes you won't. We all don't get that ending, but um, I can show up and say, "Listen, I see you, I hear you, and what do you want to happen?" And when they answer that, I'm like, "Okay, well, let's see how close we can get you to that as possible."
Yeah.
How close can we get to that? Um, and who needs to be involved? And validating that people, people need not wild, but it's wild what people need permission to do or think they need
Yeah.
permission to do.
Yes. Yes.
And so often people just want to be like, "You can feel that way." You
Yeah.
know what? I can. I sure
Yeah.
can. And I
Yeah.
just needed someone to say that to me.
Yeah. I find that in my work all the time. Again, it goes back to the opening question I ask every guest is we've all unknowingly taken in a set of grief beliefs, which include our beliefs around what emotions we are, or opinions or thoughts we are or are not allowed to have in the wake of any kind of loss, not just death loss. And then so there's so much inner judgment, inner, I say, shoulding all over ourselves that we do that actually causes us to suffer unnecessarily. Grief is hard, and then it's made more difficult because we're grappling with some inner narrator that is telling us a story about what is, appropriate or welcome. And
Mhm.
so the value of what you're offering, and I feel like I do this, the bulk of my work is with people is like, oh no, this is a safe place to say, I fucking hated the way they treated me. And I'm deeply grieving the relationship I didn't get to have. Maybe I'm not even deeply grieving the person, but the relationship I didn't. And the ease that comes from that is powerful, and you shared a little bit about that in the book too, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's you touch on it, like, I love following your work and the things you do around grief because I'm always like with you, I'm always like, "Yeah, yes, that too."
Yeah.
So yeah, the both it's so important. And to say, listen, like, I have a cousin who I talk to often, and she had a relationship with her father that wasn't great. He wasn't there for her growing up, and
Yeah.
um a very similar relationship in the book, where it's like I feel this way about my dad. I don't know if I want to be there for him. He's dying. I'm the next of kin,
Yeah.
because he wasn't there for me. But also, this is the saddest I've ever been in my life.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and it's like,
Both
what do you
things are
do with all
true.
both
Yeah.
things are very true. And what do you do with that? Who do I talk to? And it's like being able to be there for someone so they can talk that through sometimes is
Yeah.
enough. Like it is that simple. It really is that
It really
simple.
is.
You
It
don't want to
really
say it.
is.
You don't want to say it that way, but it really is. Like we can all do that. We can all just show up and shut up, you know?
Show up, shut up, and listen, and keep showing up. That's my
Keep
motto.
showing
Yeah.
up. Yeah.
Well, and to your point, I think when I use the word simple, I don't want to put this on you, but maybe this is what you're getting at is it's not that their emotional experience is simple, that holding the both and of, rage and sorrow is simple. The simplicity is in the how we as grief supporters show up and name and validate. That it's that
Mhm.
simple in the process, not necessarily
Absolutely.
the experience.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, agree.
Yeah. Well, and I'm thinking about last season, I had Sundari Malcolm on, and she talked about being a caretaker for her dad and the complexity of, you
Yeah.
know, of those things. So this is real lived experience. Because you're a storyteller at heart, one of the stories that you talked about in the book that I'd love for you to share a little bit with our listeners is, I think her name was Misha. You helped her collect stories for her. I think it was for her grandkids, maybe.
For her kids.
Her
Mhm.
or for her kids, for her
For her kids.
kids.
Mhm.
You can tell us a little bit about the process of storytelling, but also just with an eye to the listeners of the show or viewers, if you're watching us on
Mhm.
YouTube. Um, how might they think about
Yeah.
getting together the stories for their loved ones too?
No,
But yeah,
absolutely.
tell us a little bit about Misha and that
Yeah,
process.
no, me heartbreaking, every every time I go into a room or with anyone, no matter the age or any of that, it's always I'm so honored, one, but also when you're young, it's like there's a life that you are also grieving that you won't get to live. Like,
Yeah.
I want us all to get to the point where we're like, you know what, I'm ready to go. But
Yes.
but we all won't get there, sadly. And Misha is one of the folks who had me in and invited me in to sit with her
Yeah.
family. And she was young, not even 30, with children. And it was this thing of like, well, what life do you want to share with your children? What about your
Yeah.
life do you want to share with them?
Yeah.
And and that's she's like, I want to leave something behind for them. And a lot of times it doesn't have, and I want people to know that it doesn't have to be this memoir or this grand story. It could
Yeah.
literally be just pages that, a journal.
Bullet points. Here's
Journals are
my
that we
favorite. Yeah.
bullet point, leave notes on toilet paper if you have to. But it was coming in and saying, what was important to you, and knowing how to ask those questions. What was important to you? What happened in your life that you want your kids to know about that you won't now get to share with them when they're able to understand?
Yeah.
And just asking for the simple things. What were your nicknames? How'd you get that? How'd you get this scar? Like the small things we forget.
Yeah.
As a writer, I'm a person, and as a storyteller, I pay such close
Yeah.
attention to the details. I always say it's hard for me. When people say, "Oh, I'll forget about you in no time," I'm like, I can never forget anyone, because when I notice people and I notice
Yeah.
things at the smallest of their makeup. And so I ask those questions that make that that of who they are. And so talking to Misha was, who do you want your kids to know you as? Uh,
Mm.
and a lot of that came from myself as well. Like when I was 22, actually when my son's mom was pregnant with him, um, I was diagnosed with the blood clotting disorder, like,
Yeah.
at maybe a month and a half before he was born. And when I was told, at any moment you could die. And so my goal was, gosh, I just want to be able to make it until he's old enough to know who his father was. And
Yeah.
so when I went to Misha, it was like I was basically asking her those things that I would have asked myself.
Yeah.
Oh, who were you at 8? Who were you at 9? What did
Yeah.
you do? How far did you ride on your bike? Why were you out there with your friends until midnight? Why were you running from police when you were 11, having fun
Yeah.
whatever that was? And we were able to capture those stories. And everyone's not a writer. And I told her, if you just tell me the story and I can write it up.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. And her kids will always have this.
Yeah.
They will always have these stories of their mom that she wanted them to have. And it's such a great, and I think we all could do it. Like I stress the importance of journaling often. I love journaling. I think we should all journal. But these things kind of become a blueprint
Yeah.
for someone's life. Like I look at my own journals from 20, I got my first one at 18, and I look back at those and I still have it, and I'm so embarrassed, but it's like, oh, but look how far I've come. Look who
Yes.
I was
And
in
they
love
just
with.
help you understand, to your point, when somebody is long gone. I think about this all the time. My late husband did not have journals. And I
Mhm,
think about and he was our memory keeper. Like, he was the one with the
mhm.
good memory, and I'm the one with the not so great
I
memory.
remember that.
Trauma brain is real.
Yeah.
Um, but I think about, it's not just, yeah, oh, the embarrassing, but it's to your point, it's how do we leave behind the richness and the
Mhm.
fullness of somebody's story? Because so much of, I think, what we struggle with when we're grieving somebody, I think especially for folks who grieve, like my daughter was 7 when my husband died. So when grieve somebody where they didn't get to know them as an adult, is it's hard to hold them in your heart and carry them forward when all you really have is the memory of their death
Yeah.
or the
Yeah.
ending. And having somebody like you, or if it's a family member, go in and get to the, did you ever skip school? Were you ever
Yeah.
rude to a teacher? Like, what was your
Yeah.
favorite color? Why did you name your pet? Helps flesh out the fullness of somebody's life, not
Yeah.
just their death.
No, absolutely. And and part of that, like I love telling people stories. And so a couple years ago, I was an artist in residence at Esalen, and I started this obituary project, even where I just put it out there into the world, saying, "Hey, if you know someone who had an obituary that was kind of trash, because there are so many trash obituaries,
Yes.
like 2 sentences and it's
Yeah.
done. And it's like, this is not a life, you know?
Yeah.
I was like, let me interview you, and I want to rewrite no matter how long they've been dead. And
Yeah.
I think I got someone who died 30 years ago and someone who died just a couple of years ago. And I did so many of them, and I listen to these people tell me the stories of their father, of their brother, of their cousin, of a friend from college, and then I rewrote this story and rewrote this obituary for them, and then you saw this like kind of a light that was
Yeah.
like, oh, there
Yeah.
was more to their life
Yeah.
than the death, you know. There was, and then they can remember them a different way, and they remember these things about them, and you see how that changes something in them, and it's like, oh, I want to tell my story too then, because it's like, oh, this person had a story, not just, oh,
Yes.
Darnell, he was born, he left someone behind, and he had a dog, and
Yeah.
he sent flowers here, and that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, what happened? What was that life about? Even in the book, I put um, one of the obituaries in the book. For my friend Vonti, and whose mom died, and she's like, "Could you write her obituary?" And speaking of complicated feelings, her and her mom was, you know, she was raised by her grandma because her mom um, had a history of drug use, and you know, nothing that she's ashamed of, and
Yeah.
she wanted to talk about all that, and she wanted to talk about it in the obituary.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Yes," but we also had family members who were like, "No." And I'm like, "Well, this is your mom. You can say
Yeah.
whatever you want to in this obituary." And we wrote it.
Yeah.
And it was like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, yeah, yeah." Because that's part of the story. This is your story. You were an amazing swimmer and you were a lifeguard when you were 16, but you were
Yeah.
also this and this.
Yes.
But you also came around sometimes, and we had fun. And it's not bad to remember any of that.
Yeah. It's not only that it's not bad to remember it, I think when we can, part of how we move forward with our grief, which is what
Mhm.
we do, not move on, and why I say for a profound loss, we carry our grief with us. It's always a part of our story, is um, to do that meaningfully means our grief is connected to the stories we have of our people.
Mhm.
And so the more rich and true and honest those stories are, the more we're able to sort of hold with more ease and more compassion the stories and our relationships with the people as we move forward. So
Mm,
I so
absolutely.
appreciate you offering that reminder. And if you're listening, it's not too late. This is actually giving me an idea. I'm going to go back and look at Eric's obituary, which I'm sure was very flat, and see what I want to rewrite. I want to make sure we get to how doing this work, um, and you kind of touched on it in that story, helps you center aliveness, helps you pay attention
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
life. But I want to get to at least one more kind of chapter or theme in the book. And it was your chapter, um, which I just love because, I love any turn of phrase or whatever. But one of your chapters in the book is called Grief Ain't Just One Way.
Grief ain't just one way.
Grief ain't just one way. Can you talk a little bit about what that means to you and the
Yeah.
lessons that we can learn from that? We'll be right back with more of this beautiful conversation. More than ever, my friends, I'm passionate about creating meaningful community and offering you more insight into my work and even into my life, too. I want a place to explore topics in depth, expand my creative expressions through things like long form essays and even maybe some audio and video guided practices. I want to be able to share some behind the scenes moments from the podcast and maybe even eventually host a Dear Lisa column. Most importantly, I want to build an authentic, interactive community off social media. Life is happening so fast, and I want a place where we can slow down, dive deeper, and figure out how to metabolize it all together. And I'd love to have you join me. That's why I launched my Substack, AFCO with Lisa Keefauver. Now, if you haven't heard me talk about it in my book or from the stage, or maybe even here on the podcast, AFCO stands for Another Fucking Growth Opportunity. Yes, of course, I had to get in a judicious use of cussing. Rest assured, my friends, like in all my work, I'll show up authentically, offer thoughtful, meaningful, and practical guidance on how to center aliveness in a world full of loss. I really look forward to your comments, our chats, creating special audio and video content for you, and more. And if you'd like things delivered to your inbox, don't worry, AFCO with Lisa Keefauver will come directly to you. You can sign up after today's episode at afcowithlisakeefauver.substack.com. You can find it in the show notes, or if that's all too much, just head to my website, lisakeefauver.com.
Right. Grief ain't just one way. Like I think so many of us, we come to it thinking that grief looks like tears, like a meltdown, the hard things that we've experienced. We heard someone broke down at a red light, which has happened to me. I've cried at a red light, and then it turns green.
Just about everywhere.
Let's go. Yeah, like I am. I've almost passed out at a Walmart. And grief does look like that too. But I get so many people, and I see so often, and I'm absolutely sure you do too, in your work, where people say, "I don't think I've grieved yet. My dad died a couple years ago, and I haven't grieved at all. And I guess it's coming." Or people will say, he's not grieving. I can't believe he hasn't grieved yet. Or maybe he didn't. I don't think she loved him as much as she says she did. She didn't grieve him. Whatever that is. Mm-hmm. And it's like grief doesn't just look like that. Grief can look so many other ways. Like the guy in the chapter, Marcus, who says, I haven't grieved my father yet, and it's been a couple of years, and he was my favorite person, and I miss him. But why do you think that is? And I'm like, well, what have you been doing over the last couple of years? And he tells me the story of how he's doing all the things his father used to do for the community, and he's planting, and you're planting in this garden, and you're doing all these things, and it's like that's grief too. You have been grieving. It doesn't just look like that. And he's like, oh, I've been waiting for this bomb to go off.
Yeah.
And it's like, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes a flower blooms, and it's like that too. And I think that's important to remember, like, we not to just look for what the other person did. And, I've heard people say it like, well, why don't I grieve like that? Why am I not doing that too? And then you have there was a thing recently where this woman was grieving the loss of her ex-husband, and her current husband was upset because the grief she was expressing for her ex-husband wasn't the same grief she expressed for her sister. When her
Mm.
sister died, it seemed to be more grief.
Yeah.
And it was like, yeah, right?
Air
More,
quotes. Yeah. Yeah.
right? And it was like, no, no,
Yeah.
don't do that.
Yeah.
Now I have to run and hide. Now I have to hide in shame
Yeah.
in the bathroom and cry alone. Because to you, grief looks like this one thing,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
powerful, Darnell. I so appreciate you teasing that out, and I appreciate that example in that chapter about Marcus, about the way sometimes grief looks like carrying out the legacy, or bringing forth a value or a virtue or a character of somebody more in your life. I think about all the time. Like Eric
Mhm.
loved to like lean in and look people right in the eye and just listen deeply when they talked. And so every time I get to do that, I feel very much like I am carrying his legacy forward. So I love that specific example, but also that you shared, and you shared it throughout the book. It's just that chapter felt very resonant, which is the expression of grief or mourning or grieving looks
Mhm.
different for every person,
Mhm.
and not just different within each people, but also your grief over one loss is going to look different than your grief over the other one for a lot of very valid reasons. Different relationship, you're a different person at the time of a new loss. You now have the experience of having grieved before. There's lots of reasons, and to pick up on a theme that we've touched on many times in the conversation, because we have the expectation, then we should all over ourselves. I'm not grieving the way so
Yeah.
and so is, and so is. We suffer unnecessarily, and or we project or pathologize. I see this a lot. Other people, to your point, ooh, they're not grieving, right? Or they might not to love, or a bomb is going to go off. And by the way, if in the beginning Marcus's grief looks like tending to the community garden or being in
Mhm.
service, and in 3 years he has a few months where he is crying all the time, that doesn't mean he wasn't grieving before. It means
Exactly.
this is the way his grief is showing up now.
Oh, exactly. Exactly that. I mean, I think when my grandmother, my favorite person in the world, died,
Yeah.
I was so happy for her. You know, I was so
Yeah.
excited for her to have that experience and to have been here and to die and to have given her permission to die when I knew she was ready to go. Um, 5 years later, that's when I'm at that red light and I'm
Yes.
bawling, and I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, well, that's it," and it's like that too. This
Yes.
too.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also the nonlinearness of it. I was just speaking with Nyla Francis, a beautiful,
Mm,
yeah, you know Nyla maybe too.
mm,
And one of the things we were talking about is some of that same theme of like judgment of others or judgment of ourselves is because we have this false assumption that grief looks linear, and that it is going to be bigger and smaller in this very orderly fashion. And
yeah,
so then when we bawl at a red light 5 years later, we tell ourselves a story. What's wrong with me? I haven't been grieving. I mean, you didn't,
yeah,
hopefully, because you know this
yeah, no,
work.
yeah,
But yeah. And so
absolutely,
that's the
absolutely.
other thing, the messiness of it, and that it doesn't look any one way is really important for
No,
us to
not at all,
remember.
and things repeat, like that. We've thrown the stages of grief to the
Yeah.
wind, and it's like, no,
Yeah.
and sometimes, most times, things will repeat. What you did at the beginning, you might do again.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
what you thought was the beginning was the middle or whatever that is, and yeah,
And new grief brings up old grief. I mean, I think about this all the
mhm,
time, and you've worked with people who've experienced multiple losses. I think we're experiencing so much collective grief. We're witnessing grief so much right now as we're
yeah,
recording this podcast right now. And I'm thinking about all the ways that it touches on. It's like this web, this ripple effect. So then it touches on old visceral experiences of how I felt during this loss or this loss. And that
mhm,
isn't a you didn't do it. It's just speaks to the fact that we are one long story. As long as we get to live, we are continually writing and rewriting a story of our lives. And how could a new experience of loss not
yes,
touch,
yes,
a previous chapter of our lives?
yes,
Yeah.
exactly that. I love that.
Yeah.
New grief brings up old grief. No, I love that.
Yeah.
Yep. Right on.
Well, 2 things, as we begin to move towards the end of our conversation, I think I'm inviting us to end on kind of how does paying attention to death help us center aliveness. But I don't think I can pass up asking you this question, and maybe this is from your personal experience of being with your grandmother, your favorite person when she died, or it could be in your experience work of a death doula. What do you want someone to know who might be having the opportunity for the first time in their life to be at the bedside of someone who is dying but feels a lot of maybe fear or dread or concern about how they will handle that moment? And this is not, by the way, prescriptive. If your choice is to not be at somebody's bedside, that is perfectly okay too. So please hear me when I say that.
Mhm.
And I mean, I was with my husband when he died. I was with my friend Joe when he died. Very different experiences. One person was in a coma and one wasn't. But and I wouldn't trade that for the world, for me personally, even as hard as it was. But so either the story of your grandmother and being with her, or what might you want people to know about
Yeah,
the experience?
I wasn't, I wasn't a death doula when my
Yes.
grandma died. I was just a person showing up with love. I didn't know there was a way to do a thing, there was a way to be,
Yeah.
but I just knew to show up and to be present, and I think that's it. That's what I want people to know, like, you don't have to show up any way but who you are.
Yeah.
So many people tell me, like, I could never do it, I would fall apart, I
Yeah.
would just cry, and I say, "Well, some people want that. People
Yeah.
that might give them permission to fall apart too."
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and, but to just be and listen and come with no expectations, with
Yeah.
just you. All you
Yeah.
have to do is show up as you. I had a kid recently, he's 21, and I showed up and he was deaf and blind on one side, um, going completely deaf and blind, eventually, and then would die within a month of me being there. And I was, you don't. There are times I still get nervous. I still
Yeah.
get anxious. I don't know, like, okay, well, I've never had this.
Yeah.
Um, how do I show up for him? But then I just trusted that, oh, I'm just going to show up and it will
Yeah.
reveal itself what is needed. If you are a listener, if you are an
Mm.
observer, and I showed up, and literally the days when I would come would just be me having a phone on the side where he could hear, playing some
Yeah.
new music that we figured out he liked, and and he couldn't speak, and I would also just massage. He had like such thick hair, like this thick fro, and I
Yeah.
would just literally put my hands in there and just massage his scalp for hours.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
you would just see him like sort of smile, and it's like, this is it.
Yeah.
This is the work too,
Yeah.
you know. And so you just show up and be observant and be a listener and
Yeah.
take it all in and know you don't have to fix anything. You're not there to fix anything. You're
Yeah.
not there to do anything but be.
Yeah. I mean, I was interviewing Saad Simone earlier this season, and he had said, I think somebody in his chaplaincy training had said, helping without healing.
Mhm,
Like, this is really what we're doing. We're walking alongside somebody, and we're offering care. You talk about bringing your full humanity to the moment.
mhm.
There's no solution. This person is dying. And there's still value in bringing your full care and humanity to them. And also, there's selfishly, I think, something that we get out of being a witness and a companion, right, to
Abs
somebody in their final moments, which I hope dovetails nicely to sort of where I thought we might close in our conversation today, which is when you have these experiences like you had with that young man, or you had with your grandmother, or you had with Misha, or you know,
Mhm.
um, or even where it's not you're by the deathbed, but like the you had with Larry, just the conversation,
Mhm.
after the funeral. What are you learning? Because I think we're always learning. There's not ed. It's all in the ing if we're lucky to keep going.
Yep.
What are you learning about aliveness, which if you haven't listened to my show before, I'm not talking about this is not happiness, this is not toxic positivity. Aliveness is the being present to the full spectrum of human emotions and actually allowing that to help us be in awe and wonder and be present to the world. So what are you learning
Yeah.
from this work about aliveness and how you're centering aliveness?
No, absolutely. For me, it is like today. Today is when it's a Wednesday we're recording this.
Yes.
It's not, it's not just a day that it's not just a Wednesday. It's like the last Wednesday that this could be the last Wednesday I get. This could be the last time I see this person alive. I hug tighter. I notice things. I pay such close attention. I
Yeah.
savor things so much more. I try not to sit too much in a bad moment. If it's like, okay, this is happening, I forgive. Like, I'm such a forgiving person because of
Mm,
this work. It's I think just seeing the humanity in other people and knowing that this work isn't what showed me that everyone has a story, but it certainly affirmed it.
yeah.
Um, and I know it, and I honor that, and so when things happen, I try, I wanna know, like, "Well, what's your story?" And I talk to
Yeah.
people, and I invite strangers, like, I invite strangers to eat. I'm on, so many
Yeah.
different apps. Couch
Yeah.
surfing and travel apps. But I also talked about just turning dating apps into, grief apps and, where you can just say, "Listen, I'm grieving. If you wanna connect with me, let's connect." Whatever that
Yeah.
is, but, just savoring life more. I'm fortunate or unfortunate enough to know that I could die at any moment from a blood
Yeah.
clot going to my brain, lungs, or heart, and that's something that's like, "Oh, well, today needs to be a good day."
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
I don't think about that all the time, but when I do think about it, I honor that thought and say, "Oh, well, yeah, I should go cliff diving off this mountain in Curacao," or whatever that is. And it's such a beautiful thing. And
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for the people who allowed me to see that and to see how beautiful life really is. And to live that life. We all every year the thing keeps getting posted about the hospice nurse who shares the 5 regrets of
Yeah.
the dying. We see it all the time, and it's so true. I read it every time, and it's like I've heard these exact same things from clients. I had a client who was 39 and he was dying, and he was a friend first, but also
Yeah.
became a client, and, he's like, "I was living my life to make my grandma happy, and she didn't want that. She wanted me to be happy, and here I am on my deathbed never having achieved that because now it's too late."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Okay." And so now I
Reminder.
it's a reminder, and
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for all of that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Darnell, that's so beautiful. I appreciate you reminding us, well, showing us and modeling to us that you are living this in practice, and also just reminding us um, of to not be afraid of
Mhm.
approaching death or approaching the end of life and actually allow it to help us savor and pay attention more. I feel like that's the theme of life right now. It's just like
Yes.
pay more attention and pay attention to what you're paying attention to.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. And the beauty of that is that's a choice we get to make not just every day, every hour. So if you're done listening to this conversation and you were already had plans to go pay attention to somebody else, I want to invite you to pause and think about what do I want to, or maybe a better way to say it is what do I get to
Mhm.
pay attention to today?
Yes.
And then follow that curiosity wherever you
Abs
go. Yeah.
absolutely. Thank you so much.
My friend, thank you so much, Darnell, for joining me again on Grief is a Sneaky Bitch podcast. You all Pick up your copy of Never Can Say Goodbye, The Life of a Death Doula and the Art of a Peaceful End. I'm going to have the link in my show notes. I'm going to share it in my stories on Instagram, on YouTube, wherever you go. I can't wait to see you IRL.
Oh, absolutely. I'll see you soon. Soon.
Soon. You're going to be out California way?
I'll see you soon. Yeah.
But thanks, everybody, for listening. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Grief is a Sneaky Bitch podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, my friends, for spending this time with us. I've had the pleasure of working with Darnell on many projects and now hosting him on the podcast twice. And we've had the chance to hang out with each other as friends too. And what you heard from him today was just a glimpse of the wisdom, stories, and care he offers in his extraordinary new book, Never Can Say Goodbye, which I'll link to in the show notes for today's episode. Now, I hope you learned something new. Maybe you felt seen or acknowledged in your own grief, or with Darnell's help, maybe you feel more equipped to show up for someone grieving the death of their loved one. If you loved this episode, we'd so appreciate it if you took just a few minutes to head to the Grief is a Sneaky Bitch show page on Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star rating, and write a review about what the show meant to you. All right, my friends, until next time, I see you, I hear you, and I'm holding you in my heart.